Breakdown Media, we up. Thanks for tuning in to another video. All right, today's video, I'm gonna tell you guys the things I learned about money since working at UPS, right? Been at UPS for over 10 years, 11 years in August, and I'm gonna tell you in this video things I've learned about money since working at UPS. Now, let's backtrack to 2014, right? Started at UPS, but before that, right, I was an independent contractor. I drove trucks, right? So I got paid with a 1099, right? So 1099 employees, you get paid. They don't take taxes out. And at the end of the year, once you do your taxes, you must deduct as much as you can deduct from a business standpoint. And whatever's after that, you pay taxes on, right? So let's say, for example, I gross $150,000, right? My business expenses, my truck note, fuel to a certain degree, any type of expenses that I use to run the business as an independent contractor, right? I will write that off. So let's say I grossed 150,000 and I was able to write off 100,000, right? With all my fees, expenses, and all of that stuff, right? At that point, I'll pay taxes on $50,000, right? So I can take money, reinvest it into the company, right? That goes as expenses, and whatever's left over, in this case, $50,000, I'll pay taxes on $50,000, right? So if I want to start another business, anything like that, I'm putting money into a different business, that's tax deductible. Putting money to my current business, that's tax deductible, right? I spend money, expenses, fixing my truck, paying for storage, paying for fuel, or paying for tolls, any types of fees that's affiliated with the business, I get to write that off. So I spend all of that money on the front end, and on the back end, whatever's left, I pay taxes on that amount. Now, as a W-2 employee working at UPS, right? Drivers, we make pretty decent amount of money. And I hear drivers all the time say, oh my gosh, why the taxes so high? Why is federal taxes so high? Let me tell you for me, right? And I'm not gonna tell you what I make, y'all could do the math, right? But let me tell you for me. At the end of the year, I do the calculation. So for federal taxes, it was 18% of my gross income I gave over to the federal government. 18%, like I said, 18% of my gross income I gave over to the federal government. Now, one might say like, oh, well, 18%, that's not that bad. But let's just say, for instance, and this is not my numbers, let's say you make $100,000, right? $18,000 went over to the federal government, and that's not even including Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security deductions, and all that stuff. And let's not say if you have a retirement, 401k, of course, that's your money, but at the same time, 18% going to federal taxes. I live in Texas. We don't have state taxes. So if you're in a different state, you sending 18% over to the federal government, and your state's still saying like, hey, give me my money, right? So as a W-2 employee, before you even get paid, the federal government is already taking their taxes, right? So I learned that, and I learned the difference in being a subcontractor or a contractor, getting paid as a 1099 worker and getting paid as a W-2 worker. The tax structure is different. It's sort of the opposite. Now, I'm getting taxed 18% by the federal government as a W-2 employee, right? What I always prefer to do is to let them take as much as possible. I claim zero, no dependents, and I just let them take as much out of my check as possible, which, you know, we're cool with that. And at the same time, towards the end of the year or when it's time to file taxes, what I'll do is at the end of the year, when I'm ready to file taxes, what I'll do is I'll take all my deductions. So if I have a business going, if I have two businesses going, all of the money that I put into those businesses, what I'll do, I'll write that off, right? So at the end of the day, I can write off enough things because I'm starting a business. That's the only way I can get some of my money back. Now, we could do a separate video and talk about HSA and all of that stuff like that. But for this video in particular, I'm showing you guys the difference in a 1099 income and a W-2 income. So what I always recommend to my drivers, especially making six figures and high, even if you're not making six figures, W-2 employee, you need to find expenses in order to write off. So if you start a small business, maybe it's a hobby, maybe you like baking cookies, maybe you like baking cakes, maybe you like making arts and crafts, maybe you just like to cut grass on the side, stuff like that. So anything that you have that's a hobby, you can actually turn it into a business. And the government loves small business owners. The government loves when you start a business and you're trying to stimulate the economy with the business, right? So anything that you put into the business, any money that you put into a business, you can write it all, because the definition of a business is an act in which you're attempting to make money. So let's just say your business is not successful. Let's just say you put a whole bunch of money into it and you're not going to see any returns just yet. That's cool, right? It doesn't matter, because you can still write off of those funds because you are attempting to make money within your business. Whether it's successful or not, you attempted to make money. So let's just say we like using the round number $100,000, right? Use $100,000 in your W-2 income. They take $18,000 out for federal taxes. Let's say that year in particular, you take $10,000 and you start a business. Put it into a hobby that you already have. You bought some more equipment, stuff like that, right? You take that $10,000. So now you're able to write off that $10,000. So you might just get a refund because they took more money than they had to. I always like to play it safe and let them take as much as possible. Now, some years I don't write off enough, and yet they ask for more money, right? We don't like that. But most years, I actually still get a refund, because why? I take money out of my W-2 income that's already taxed, and I put it into a business, and I try to make money through another business, and yet I get a refund, right? Whether I'm making money or not in my small business, I can still write those funds off, because, like I said before, the government loves small businesses. The government loves it when you start a business. They love when you thrive as a business, and you attempting to have a business of your own, small business. They love it. Whether it's, cutting grass over there, or like I said, babysitting, walking dogs, and maybe start a dry cleaners, maybe buy a car wash, maybe have a storage unit, anything like that. They love small businesses. So what I learned, I'm out of breath a little bit, but what I learned in the 10 years, going on 11 years at UPS, is that your strategies has to be a little different, right? It's the same, at the same time, it's a little different, right? With the W-2 income, Uncle Sam is going to tax the more you make. But you can get some of that money back if you start a business. Start a business and it end up being successful, you can really, really reap those benefits, right? So that's what I learned here at UPS. And it doesn't matter, it can go for any job. You're making 80, 85,000, even higher than that. It doesn't matter. You can use this strategy, and no matter what you're doing as a W-2 employee. This is just what I learned. Brick Dot Media, see you on the next one. We out of here.
Brick Dot Media.